His Facebook, you can catch his sermon if you just go to his Facebook. And if he wants to say some more things, that's fine. I did look on his book today, and I saw him at a couple of Beaver games, so he's a Beaver fan. And wife Brenda, as you all know, she works with Young Life, and he doesn't really need the introduction, so I won't steal any more time.
Gotta get the technology working.
And he really looks like his son. Or his son look at that. Did you see what he had up there?
There we go, we got it.
Did you see what he has?
Oh, there he is. Yes, I look just like my son. Imagine that. Well, it's good to be back. See everybody again. Can you hear me okay? I'm not very loud sometimes. Normally I preach on Sunday mornings on Facebook, but I'm on a little sabbatical for the summer, so I may or may not be on there during the summer. I'm recording this, so this will be up tomorrow. And so if you're really diligent and you want to watch it again to refresh your memory, you can watch it tomorrow on Facebook. How's that? Yes, I've been on sabbatical, but we've been kept very busy watching Oregon State baseball. And Brenda's been very busy with Young Life, as usual. And when the baseball season started, we didn't intend to go to very many baseball games. But we've been down to Corvallis, I don't even know how many times, a few times this year. And we even went to Phoenix and Los Angeles for Beaver games there. We know people who have season tickets and they call up or email and say, hey, do you want a ticket? And we say, well, we're not sure. No, we say, absolutely, we will take your ticket. And so then we go down to Corvallis. You probably don't watch college as much as we do, but college teams play a series against a team. They usually play 3 games, Friday, Saturday, Sunday usually. And so when we were in Phoenix for Arizona State series, we also went over to Grand Canyon University, which is down there, because we know kids that go there. Brenda, because she has so much free time, she does Aspire at the high school where she helps kids get to college and decide what they want to do after high school. And some of her Aspire kids are down at Grand Canyon University. Then we went to Los Angeles for a UCLA game, and then we stuck around for a Dodger game on Monday. And there's a guy named Trevor Larnach that plays for the Minnesota Twins, and that's who the Dodgers were playing on that Monday. And Trevor played at Oregon State a few years back, and he's very famous for hitting a home run that tied up the game in the game number 2 of the college championship series. This was 2018, and so he helped Oregon State win the national championship. And the Beavers were about this close. Can I get my fingers any closer together? They were about that close to losing, but a guy from Arkansas went for a fly ball and he missed it. And then the guy got on base and Trevor Larnach hit him in with a home run. And then the next day, Oregon State won the series, so that was very nice. And at the Dodger game, we were cheering for Trevor, and people said, well, are you family? And I said, well, yeah, that's my boy out there. And I said, no, not really. But Trevor hit a home run to tie the game in the 8th inning, so it's kind of deja vu all over again. But we left, this was in the 8th inning, so we left and went back to where we were staying, and the game went to 12 innings, it went overtime, and the Dodgers ended up winning. But we did get a Mookie Betts bobblehead. Do people know Mookie Betts? I like Mookie Betts he used to play for Boston before he went to the Dodgers. And in 2018, the same year that Oregon State won the College World Series, Boston won the MLB World Series. And so that was a very good year for baseball in our house. So we went to Los Angeles, and my friend Dave, I've talked about Dave before, we went down on Friday, but Brenda had to stick around because she had a flower basket sale on Friday, and then Young Life does an annual fun run, and that was on Saturday. And so Brenda had to stick around to make sure that those things got done appropriately, because Brenda is the boss, you know. And nothing happens unless Brenda and Louise, her friend, make it happen. So we had a good time. Baseball tickets are pretty cheap, actually. It's kind of funny. And we have air miles, Southwest points, so a nice way to go on vacation. So Bruce Waltke, Dan was talking about scholars. Bruce Waltke is a very good Bible scholar, and he wrote a commentary on the Proverbs. If you have an NIV Bible, the new one, he was very involved in making the new NIV Bible. But what he says in the Proverbs commentary is, in a world bombarded by inane cliches, trivial catchwords, and godless sound bites, the expression of true wisdom is in short supply today. The church stands alone as the receptacle and repository of the inspired traditions that carry a mandate for a holy life from the sages, the greatest of whom was Solomon, and from the greater than Solomon, Jesus Christ. And so that is the reason for studying and knowing the Proverbs and other biblical wisdom, so we can escape the inane cliches, trivial catchwords, and godless sound bites that come to us from the world. And instead, we can learn and practice wisdom and moral instruction. And so to learn how to live skillfully, to live morally with righteousness, justice, and equity. That is what the Proverbs in particular, and the whole Bible, of course, will teach us. And it is true, the Proverbs, if you read them, they can come across as kind of a haphazard arrangement of terse and sometimes difficult to understand statements. But Waltke, he sees a pretty skillful arrangement of the Proverbs. So after the introduction, from 1:8 to 9:18 is arranged chiastically, actually. And chi is the Greek letter that looks like our X. And so if something is arranged chiastically, it looks like one side of an X. And so the first part corresponds with the last part, the second part with the second to the last, and the third with the third to the last, and so on, however many the writer wanted to give us. And that's a very Hebrew thing to do, because the Hebrews didn't have a lot of paper or iPhones. And so they learned by hearing. And so if you arrange things and you use words that sounded familiar, or words that corresponded with each other, then people could remember what you wrote because they don't have paper in front of them to read it. We're kind of lazy, we just ask Google or Siri, and there it is. So previously here, we went through Psalm 3. That was back in 2019, in the summer of 2019. And not much has happened in the world since 2019, so that we would need to have wisdom. But since I finished the Gospel of John a few weeks back, I thought since I was coming up here, I'd start in on another summer of wisdom, but I would start in Proverbs 1, because I kind of jumped ahead in 2019. And today we'll cover the introduction, Proverbs 1:1 to 7. And the introduction tells us the who, what, and where of the Proverbs. Who wrote the Proverbs? What are the Proverbs good for anyways? And where do we start if we want to acquire wisdom? So that's the who, what, and where. And I remember back from elementary school, when we would write things, we would write about the who, what, when, where, how, and studying the Proverbs, studying the rest of the Bible, that's how we acquire wisdom. And then we apply what we learn to our lives. And the why comes from Proverbs itself. Solomon says in Proverbs 3:13-18, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who obtains understanding. For her benefit, wisdom's benefit, is more profitable than silver, and her gain is better than gold. She is more precious than rubies, and none of the things you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are very pleasant, and all her paths are peaceful. She is like a tree of life to those who obtain her, and everyone who grasps hold of her will be blessed." And so just a question for you, do you spend more time seeking to acquire money and gold and silver, or acquiring wisdom that comes from the Bible? So let me read the whole thing here before we get going. This would be Proverbs 1:1-7. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to learn wisdom and moral instruction, to discern wise counsel, to receive moral instruction and skillful living with righteousness, justice, and equity, to impart shrewdness to the morally naive, a discerning plan to the young person. Let the wise also hear and gain instruction, and let the discerning acquire guidance. To discern the meaning of a proverb and a parable, the sayings of the wise and their riddles. Fearing the Lord is the beginning of discernment, but fools have despised wisdom and moral instruction. And so most of the Proverbs, as it says, were written by Solomon, and so that's the who of this passage, Solomon. But there were some parts that were written by other people. All the way up to chapter 22 is said to be written by Solomon. He didn't necessarily write or create all of them. He would collect wisdom from all around the world and gather it into this book of wisdom. Then we have 30 sayings of the wise in chapter 22 and 24. Further sayings of the wise in chapter 24. Collection number 5 is also from Solomon. It goes all the way to chapter 29. And then we get the sayings of Agur and Lemuel. And obviously they're not from Solomon. So Solomon wrote or gathered almost all of the Proverbs except for those few. And then more material was added, and it was put together to form the final book of the Proverbs. And then in verses 2-6, we have a summary of what is being taught in the book. So the what. First it says to learn wisdom and moral instruction. The NIV says to know wisdom and instruction. And the new NIV says for gaining wisdom and instruction. To know has a wide range of meanings. The Hebrew dictionary lists 10 categories. And the occurrence here is to understand something, to be good at something, or to know how to do something. It's learning something, so it's more than just head knowledge. It's learning something and then putting it into practice in a skillful manner. And so the purpose of the book of Proverbs is so the reader can learn wisdom and moral instruction. Wisdom is a good word. It has a range of meanings, very broad range, 6. So skill in technical matters. Bob has skill in certain technical matters. We have experience and shrewdness, a prudent woman, or political wisdom. There's worldly wisdom. In the Bible, we have wisdom of Egypt and Babylon and Edom. And so there is wisdom out there. It's kind of cracking the code on what's wisdom and what's not. This occurrence is the pious wisdom of Israel, which is in the Bible. Then there's God's wisdom and wisdom personified. study the Proverbs and learn what wisdom is and put it into practice, then we will know wisdom. And we will come across wisdom personified later in the Proverbs. Wisdom is talked about as a lady that roams around in the street, asking, calling out, will anybody come and find me? Will anybody find wisdom? But nobody hears her or pays attention to her. And then the other thing to learn is moral instruction. So that's discipline as sort of a chastising people, training, exhortation, or warning. And so in the Proverbs, there's often a contrast between the wise person and the foolish person. And the foolish person will suffer because of their folly, while the wise can avoid problems by living wisely. We ourselves might act foolishly sometimes, and then we suffer the consequences. And sometimes that's how we learn, that's how we come to acquire moral instruction. It's better to learn it through observing the mistakes of others, or we can learn to live with the mistakes that we've made, the consequences of our own mistakes. So the first what of the Proverbs here is to learn wisdom and moral instruction. The second what is to understand or discern. And verse 2 continues, and to discern wise counsel. So discern, we probably know, it means to accept and pay attention to something. And the something here is wise counsel, or literally words of understanding. So to discern wise counsel means to accept the words of others that reflect understanding or wise counsel. So we might think of a doctor who gives advice on living healthy or with illnesses we might have, how to treat an illness. You might think of a lawyer who gives advice about estate planning, or some other legal aspect. A car mechanic who gives counsel on maintaining or fixing your car. An experienced mom who offers counsel on parenting. And so certain people have wise counsel to offer in certain areas of life. And so this is wise counsel as opposed to inane cliches, trivial catchwords, and godless sound bites that we get from the world. And so the second what that we get from the Proverbs is learning how to discern what is wise counsel and what is not. Another example might be preachers. Some preachers preach something that is not quite in line with the Bible, and other preachers preach what the Bible teaches. And we have to learn how to discern who is preaching what is in line with the Bible. The third what is to receive moral instruction in 4 areas. Verse 3 says, to receive moral instruction in skillful living, in righteousness, justice, and equity. And so the Proverbs will give us moral instruction. And we are to receive this moral instruction. We are to accept it, receive it, or acquire it. And so metaphorically, it means to comply with commandments or words, the words and commandments that we learn from the Bible. Well, what we are going to receive is moral instruction, which we saw back in verse 1. So that's discipline, training, and exhortation, and warning. And some of it will be learned the hard way through God's discipline, but we can read the Proverbs and other wisdom of the Bible and put it into practice. And then we can avoid foolish choices and the consequences that come along with them. Not that everything will be perfect if we do that, but at least fewer of the problems we have will be from our own mistakes. It will be not our fault. And this moral instruction from the Proverbs comes in the area of skillful living, which is further broken down into righteousness, justice, and equity. And so skillful living is the result of a self-disciplined life. It means to be prudent and circumspect. And this, the form of it means to give attention to consider, to ponder, to have insight and understanding. And so it's a synonym of wisdom, but while wisdom focuses on living skillfully, this word focuses on acting prudently. The word also focuses on the results of acting prudently, like having success. And so one example from the Bible is the prudent actions of Abigail in contrast to her foolish husband Nabal, from 1 Samuel 25. And I shouldn't do this from memory, but Nabal was not going to give David honor. David was the king. But his wife Abigail said, well, he's the king, I'm going to show him honor. And so it didn't go too well for Nabal. Skillful living then is broken down into righteousness, justice, and equity. And these words come up in the news these days. But the question is, are the way they're used in the news, is that the same way they're used in the Bible? The way we use the words, are they the same way that they're understood in the Bible? So if we are going to live skillfully, our lives and actions will be marked by righteousness, justice, and equity. And so these behaviors, they bring healing and peace to our community, to our families. And so let's go through them one at a time. Righteousness is conduct that conforms to a standard. So it's used in the Bible, it's used for commercial weights and measures that are supposed to conform to a standard. You're not supposed to weigh something and use a weight that's marked with a 2 when it's really a 1 or something. You should have fair measurements. In the moral realm, it refers to righteous conduct that conforms to God's law, to God's teaching. Justice refers to the ability to make a decision that is just. Now, when you end up in court, you're going to want a judge who is going to make a just and right decision. Now, I suppose if you're guilty, you might want a judge who would let guilty people off, but that's a different story, because none of you will ever end up in jail, I'm sure. So we don't really want a judge to favor the rich over the poor or the poor over the rich. We want judges who treat everybody the same. And so from that background, we can think about our personal lives. The person with prudence will make decisions that are just and right when it comes to their children, their families, their workplace. And the standard for what is just and right is going to be righteousness, which we just saw. Righteousness are decisions that are conform to God's law, to what the Bible teaches. But let's not forget Jesus' injunction to the Pharisees, who asked his disciples, why is your teacher eating with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus said to them, well, you go and learn what it means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. And that's a quote from Hosea 6:6. Jesus said, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. And so God's law includes things like mercy and grace. Then the third word was equity. We hear a lot about equity these days. Equity has the basic idea of what is upright, straight, and right. And so it refers to activity that is morally upright and straight. It's on the proper moral path. So elsewhere it's used to describe cows walking on a path and staying on the path and not veering to the left or to the right. And so that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be like those cows. That's from 1 Samuel 6:12. Wisdom literature often uses the idea of a straight path to describe what is morally straight. And the NIV uses the word fair. So when you hear on the news people talking about equity, that's not usually what it means. Usually it means we're going to treat these people different to bring them up to where everybody else is because they they say to impart shrewdness to the morally naive and a discerning plan to the young person. Let the wise also hear and gain instruction, and let the discerning acquire guidance. And so notice, first of all, that we've switched from the student who is to know, understand, and receive, and now we're talking about the teacher who is going to impart things. And the teacher here is the Proverbs. As we'll find out later, if we kept reading, it's the father. The father is imparting to his son. And so the Proverbs will impart something to people who study them. And in the first instance, it was to the Father, Son, and to the people of Israel. But we get to benefit from what Solomon wrote down. And verse 4 is a very good example of Hebrew parallelism, where it says the same thing twice in different words. And so the two things are basically saying the same thing, with maybe a little nuance. And so shrewdness is essentially the same as a discerning plan, and the morally naive is essentially the same as the young person. Shrewdness is prudence, shrewdness, craftiness, or cleverness. It's talking about a shrewd plan of action viewed either positively or negatively. Shrewdness can be positive or negative. So it's used in the Bible negatively about a planned deception, a premeditated murder. You can plan a murder shrewdly. Describe the serpent in Genesis 3. The serpent was described as shrewd, crafty, and cunning. And he tricked Adam and Eve into sinning. Describes the cunning plans of people and deception. It describes a wicked, concocted plan, but it's also used positively of a morally prudent lifestyle. So there's no benefit or virtue for us to live in this world unaware of what's going on. We need to be wise as serpents. We need to be shrewd in how we make decisions, but shrewd in a positive way, not a negative way. And the Proverbs, if we study the Proverbs, they will give us a shrewd plan for our life. And such a plan involves knowledge and purpose, and it parallels the shrewd plan for the morally naive, or a discerning plan for the young person. And the young tend to be morally naive because they are young and they have things to learn. Right? They have not yet learned anything from their experiences because they haven't had experiences yet. But all of us, even older people, are still morally naive because sometimes we do not learn anything from our experiences. And all of us, even if we are considered wise by other people, have some area of our lives that could use a more discerning plan. And so none of us have fully arrived yet in this life. And so that's why Solomon goes on in verse 5 to say, let the wise hear and gain instruction, and let the discerning acquire guidance. So that's more Hebrew parallelism. And what it is saying is that even the truly wise have not yet arrived. And since they are truly wise, they will know that there is always something more to gain from the Bible, and more guidance to acquire from God. That is a wise person. And then finally in verse 6, the last what is to understand or discern. And it says to discern the meaning of a proverb and a parable, the sayings of the wise and their riddles. And so that's a third set of Hebrew parallelism. A proverb is basically the same thing as a saying of the wise, and a parable is basically the same thing as the riddles of the wise. And so the meaning of to understand or to discern is to distinguish or learn. And so by studying the Proverbs, we can learn how to understand what wise people are saying, disciples asked him, "Why are you talking in parables?" He quoted from the Old Testament, Isaiah, I think, and he said, "Well, I speak in parables so that nobody will understand me," which is kind of funny. But by studying the parables and the rest of the Bible, we can learn to understand the teachings of Jesus, especially the parables that he taught. And we will be able to hear the messages that come to us from the world and discern whether or not they are worthwhile or simply those inane cliches and trivial catchwords. And so that is the benefit of studying the Proverbs and other wisdom. Well, if we're going to embark on this journey of discovery, we have to start somewhere. And Proverbs says that fearing the Lord is the beginning of discernment in Proverbs 1:7. And so if we want to understand the Proverbs and be wise, we have to first of all fear the Lord. And yet, Waltke says that fearing the Lord is misunderstood by most people. That's a common thing for a scholar to say, is that I understand, but nobody else does. But I think he's probably right. Am I going to have to confiscate that name? Well, we all know what fear is, right? We know what fear is. And we know who the Lord is. And just to be clear, we're talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel. But we can't just combine the two words together, or we'll misunderstand the concept. And Waltke says it's just like we can't understand what a butterfly is by understanding what butter is, and understanding what a fly is, and then putting the two together. It doesn't work. And so he says that the fear of the Lord has both a rational aspect and a non-rational aspect at the same time. And so the rational aspect involves revelation that can be taught and memorized. It has to do with the mind. So we have scriptures, we have God's laws, commands, and ordinances. We have his teachings that we can read and understand and memorize. And so to fear God, use the word God, it refers to a standard of moral conduct known and accepted by people in general. And that standard motivates people to right behavior even when the state does not enforce moral sanctions. And so some people behave themselves even though the government's not going to come down on them because they fear God, the concept of God. Maybe not the God of the Bible, but they fear God. But the fear of the Lord, and Lord is probably in small caps, so it's talking about Yahweh, the God of Israel. Fear of the Lord refers to the Lord's special revelation, whether through Moses or Solomon. And so when Solomon uses the term fear of the Lord, he is tracing it back to God's revelation. And he would have had the first 5 books of the Bible at least, and maybe a few more. We are luckier than Solomon because we have the complete Bible. And so the non-rational aspects of the fear of the Lord involve an emotional response of love, fear, and trust. And so we think of fear and love as opposites, polar opposites. But Moses in Deuteronomy treats the love of the Lord and the fear of the Lord as synonyms. And so in Deuteronomy 5:29, God says, "If only it would really be their desire to fear me and obey all of my commandments in the future, so it may go well with them and their descendants forever." And so loving God involves fearing God and keeping his commandments. And then in 6:1-2, Moses writes, "Now these are the commandments, statutes, and ordinances that the Lord your God instructed me to teach you, so that you may carry them out in the land where you are headed, and that you may so revere the Lord your God that you will keep all the statutes and commandments that I'm giving you, your children, and your grandchildren, all your lives to prolong your days." And so loving God and fearing God are two sides of the because their fear of God was made up only of rules that were taught by men. And so Isaiah wrote, "The Lord says, these people worship me with their mouths and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is based on nothing but human rules." And Jesus quoted that also in the New Testament. And so we can honor God with our mouth. We can say that we love God, but it's not true if all we are doing is following our own tradition, our own rules. And so if we are wise, we accept God's revelation because we fear and stand in awe of the Lord, who upholds his own teaching. And God's teaching promises life to the obedient, but it also threatens death to the disobedient. And so in C.S. Lewis's story, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the beaver tells the children about Aslan, the great lion, who represents Christ in the story. And the children ask, "Is he safe?" And the beaver answers, "Of course not, but he is good." And I noticed it's a beaver doing this and not a duck, so that should tell us something right there. Wisdom from the Proverbs. And so Waltke writes, "As people in general are motivated to obey their conscience out of fear of God, whatever God they believe in the same way saints respond to the moral imperatives of Scripture apart from either legal or ecclesiastical sanctions, so church sanctions. For them, the fear of the Lord is just as real as their love for him. Both are rooted in their faith. They believe his promises and love him. They believe his threats and fear him. In summary, and he's quoting another commentator, Charles Bridges, the fear of the Lord is that affectionate reverence by which the child of God bends himself humbly and carefully to his Father's law. And so that is the introduction to the book of Proverbs. And we had the who, what, and where of the Proverbs. The who was Solomon. He wrote or collected most of the Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. But there are a few other people who added to the collection. And then the what are the Proverbs good for? Why would I want to read the Proverbs? So we can know wisdom and moral instruction. We can understand or discern wise counsel. We can receive moral instruction in skillful living. That includes righteousness, justice, and equity. The Proverbs will impart shrewdness and a discerning plan to the naive and the young. But the wise and the older can also hear and gain instruction and acquire guidance from God. And then to understand and discern the meanings of proverbs and parables, sayings of the wise and their riddles. And finally, the where of the Proverbs is this: where does one start if they want to acquire wisdom and discernment? And the place to start is the fear of the Lord. And remember that James, the New Testament writer James, said, if you want wisdom, pray for it, and God will give it to you. If you pray without doubting, I think. I really shouldn't quote scripture from memory, because did I get it close down? Okay, good. So the place to start, if you want wisdom, is the fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord has rational and non-rational aspects. The rational aspect involves learning what the Lord has taught, memorizing scripture, studying scripture, learning what God has taught us and what he requires us to do and obey. The non-rational aspect involves an emotional response to God, a response of fear, love, and trust. We accept God's revelation because we fear God and stand in awe of him. God upholds his own teaching, and he teaches that he promises life to people who obey him, but he threatens death to people who disobey. And as Bridges said, of the Lord is the affectionate reverence by which the child of God bends himself or herself humbly and carefully to his Father's law. And as the wise beaver says, of course Christ is not safe, but he is good. So if you want to become wise, begin with the fear of the Lord, and then spend time in the Word, understand it, and apply it to your life. And maybe I'll be back with the next section from Proverbs. Thanks for your attention. Daniel?
All right, thank you, Pastor Andy.